Julien dreamed of becoming a military man. Was shocked to know that Julien and Madame de Renal loved each other. Before Julien Sorel opened an unexpected prospect, he was able to get to Paris. Opposite him sat a bright blonde, unusually slender, with very beautiful but cold eyes, where Sunday worship was held, and twice shot Mrs. de Renal. Stendhal was a 19th-century French writer, best known for the novel The Red and the Black. He is highly regarded for the acute analysis of his character's psychology and considered one of the early and foremost practitioners of realism. Now let's get started. Monsieur de Renal, the mayor of the French town of Verrières in the Franche-Comté district, a man who was smug and vain, informed his wife about the decision to take a tutor to the house. There was no special need for a tutor, just a local rich man. Mr. Valneau, this vulgar screamer always rivaling the mayor, was too proud of the new pair of Norman horses. Well, Mr. Valneau had horses now, but he had no tutor. Mr. de Renal had already arranged with Papa Sorel that his youngest son would serve at his house. The old curé, Mr. Schellin, recommended him the son of a carpenter as a young man of rare abilities who had been studying theology for 3 years and brilliantly knew Latin. His name was Julien Sorel. He was 18 years old. This was a short, fragile-looking young man whose face bore a stamp of striking originality. He had irregular, but delicate features, large black eyes sparkling with fire and thought, and dark chestnut hair. Julien never went to school. A regimental physician, a participant in the Napoleonic campaigns, trained him Latin and history. Since childhood, Julien dreamed of becoming a military man. In Napoleon's time this was the surest way to make a career and get out into people. But times have changed. Julien realized that the only open way before him was to become a priest. He was ambitious and proud, but he was willing to endure everything to make his way. Madame de Renal did not like her husband's plan. She adored her 3 boys, and the thought that there would be some stranger between her and the children would lead her into despair. What was her surprise when she saw a pale, frightened boy in front of her, who seemed to her unusually beautiful and very unhappy. However, not a month went by, as everyone in the house, even Mr. de Renal, began to treat him with respect. Julien held himself with great dignity, and his knowledge of Latin was admired. He was able to recite any page of the New Testament. The maid of Madame de Renal, Eliza, fell in love with a young tutor. In confession, she told the Abbé Schellin that she had inherited some property, and now wanted to marry Julien. Cure was genuinely happy for his pet, but Julien resolutely refused an enviable proposal. He was ambitious and dreamed of glory. He wanted to conquer Paris. However, he skillfully hid it. In summer the family moved to Vergy. Here, Madame de Renal spent whole days with the children and the tutor. Julien seemed to her smarter, kinder, nobler than all the men around her. She began to understand that she loved Julien. But does he love me? After all, she was older than he for as long as 10 years. Julien liked Madame de Renal. He found her charming. He had never seen such women. But Julien was not in love at all. He wanted to win Madame de Renal to assert himself and to take revenge on this self-righteous Mr. de Renal, who allowed himself to talk with him indulgently and even rudely. When Julien warned Madame de Renal that he would come to her bedroom at night, she answered him with the most sincere indignation. At night, when he left his room, he died of fear, his knees buckled. But when he saw Madame de Renal, she seemed so beautiful to him that all conceited ravings were taken from his head. He said to her with tears, "I love you so much." She felt very happy. Madame de Renal was defeated by Julien's tears and his desperation. It took several days, and Julien, with all the ardor of, fell in love with her. Lovers were happy, but unexpectedly Madame de Renal's younger son fell seriously ill. And the unhappy woman thought she was killing her son with her love for Julien. She realized what sin she did before God. She was tortured by remorse. She pushed away Julien, who was shocked by the depth of her grief and despair. Fortunately, the child was recovering. Mr. de Renal did not suspect anything, but the servants Eliza was shocked to know that Julien and Madame de Renal loved each other. Elisa, when she met Mr. Valno on the street, told him that her mistress had an affair with a young tutor. The same evening, Mr. de Renal received an anonymous letter from which he learned what was happening in his house. Madame de Renal managed to convince her husband of her innocence, but the whole city was only engaged with the history of her love affairs. Julien's mentor Abbot Schellin believed that he must at least a year leave the city, to the seminary in Besançon. Julien left Verrières, but 3 days later he returned to say goodbye to Madame de Renal. He made his way to her room, but their date was overshadowed. It seemed to them that they part forever. Julien came to Besançon and was to the rector of the seminary, Abbot Pirard. He was very excited. Besides, Pirard's face was so ugly that it caused horror in him. For 3 hours the rector examined Julien, and he was so impressed by his knowledge in Latin and theology that he took him to the seminary for a small scholarship and even gave him a separate cell. This was a great mercy. But the seminarians amicably hated Julien. He was too talented and gave the impression of a thinking person. They did not forgive this. Julien had to choose a confessor, and he chose the abbot of Pirard, not even suspecting that this act would be decisive for him. The abbot was sincerely attached to his pupil, but Pirard's position in the seminary was very fragile. His enemies, the Jesuits, were doing everything to force him to resign. Fortunately, he had a friend and patron at the court, an aristocrat from Franche-Comté, Marquis de la Mole, whose errands the abbot regularly performed. Learning about the persecution to which Pirard was subjected, the Marquis de la Mole invited him to move to the capital and promised one of the best parishes in the vicinity of Paris. The Marquis de la Mole, a politician and grandee, enjoyed great influence at court. He took Abbot Pirard in his Parisian mansion. In the conversation, he mentioned that for several years he had been looking for an intelligent person who could have engaged in his correspondence. The abbot offered to this place his pupil, a man of very low background, but energetic, intelligent, with a high soul. So before Julien Sorel opened an unexpected prospect, he was able to get to Paris. Having received the invitation of the Marquis, Julien first traveled to Verrières, hoping to see Madame de Renal. He heard that lately she had fallen into the most frenzied piety. Despite many obstacles, he managed to penetrate into the room of his lover. Never had she seemed so beautiful to him. However, her husband suspected something, and Julien was forced to flee. Arriving in Paris, he first examined the places associated with the name of Napoleon, and only then went to the Abbot Pirard. The abbot introduced Julien to the Marquise, and in the evening he sat at a common table. Opposite him sat a bright blonde, unusually slender, with very beautiful but cold eyes. Julien clearly did not like Mademoiselle Mathilde de la Mole. The new secretary was assimilated quickly. In 3 months the Marquis considered Julien quite suitable for himself. He worked hard, silent, comprehensible, and gradually began to lead all the most difficult cases. He became a real dandy and completely mastered the art of living in Paris. The Marquis de la Mole gave Julien the order. This calmed the pride of Julien. Now he kept more relaxed and not so often felt offended. But with Mademoiselle de la Mole he was emphatically cold. This 19-year-old girl was very clever. She was bored in the company of her aristocratic friends. But Marquise de Cressenois pretends to her hand. Once a year, Mathilde mourned. Julien was told that she did this in honor of the ancestor of the family of Boniface de la Mole, the beloved of Queen Margarita of Navarre, who was beheaded on April 30, 1574, at the Grève Square in Paris. Legend had it that the queen demanded from the executioner the head of her lover and buried it in her own in the chapel. Julien saw that Mathilde genuinely cared about this romantic story. Gradually, he stopped evading conversations with Mademoiselle de la Mole. She talked positively to him frequently. Conversations with her were so interesting that he even forgot his role as an outraged plebeian. It would be funny, he thought, if she fell in love with me. Mathilde had long realized that she loved Julien. This love seemed to her very heroic. The girl of her position loves the carpenter's son. From the moment she realized that she loved Julien, she ceased to be bored. Julien rather stimulated his imagination, than was carried away by love. But having received a letter from Mathilde with an explanation in love, he could not hide his triumph. He, a poor peasant, was loved by a noble lady. She preferred him to an aristocrat, the Marquis de Cressenois. One day, Mathilde waited for him at 1 o'clock in the morning. Julien thought that it was a trap because he didn't think she loved him seriously. And he thought Mathilde's friends wanted to kill him or put him to ridicule. Armed with pistols and a dagger, he penetrated into the room of Mademoiselle de la Mole. He found that it was not a trap. Mathilde was submissive and gentle. They loved each other. But the next day, talking with him, she barely restrained anger and irritation with his acting like a boyfriend. She was horrified at the thought that she became Julien's mistress. Julien's self-esteem was offended, and they both decided that everything was over between them. But Julien felt that he had fallen madly in love with this wayward girl, that he could not live without her. Mathilde constantly occupied his soul and imagination. Julien's acquaintance, the Russian Prince Korazov, advised him to cause jealousy of his beloved and start courting some secular beauty. And he did it. The Russian plan, to Julien's surprise, worked without fail. Mathilde was jealous. She was again in love, and only a monstrous pride prevented her from making a step forward. Once Julien, without thinking of danger, put a ladder to the window of Mathilde. Seeing him, she fell into his arms. Soon, Mademoiselle de la Mole told Julien that she was pregnant and wanted to marry him. Having learned about everything, the Marquis was infuriated. But Mathilde insisted, and the father finally gave up. To avoid shame, the Marquis decided to create Julien's brilliant position in society. He sought for him the patent of a hussar lieutenant in the name of Julien Sorel de la Vernet. Julien went to his regiment. His joy was boundless. He dreamed of a military career and his future son. Suddenly he received news from Paris. Mathilde asked him to return immediately. When they met, she handed him an envelope with a letter from Madame de Renal. The letter of Madame de Renal was monstrous. She wrote about Julien as a hypocrite and careerist, capable of any meanness, just to get out into people. In truth, she had been forced to write the letter by the Jesuits in Besançon who hated him succeeding in Paris. It was clear that M. de la Mole would never agree to his marriage with Mathilde. Without a word, Julien left Mathilde, sat in the mail coach and rushed to Vierre. There he bought a gun in the armory shop, entered the church inn, where Sunday worship was held, and twice shot Mrs. de Renal. Already in prison he learned that Madame de Renal was not killed, but only wounded. He was happy and felt that now he could die peacefully. After Julien, Mathilde came to Villers. She used all her connections, distributed money and promised in the hope of mitigating the sentence. On the day of judgment, the whole juries had already been suborned by Mathilde. Julien was supposed to be innocent. But he really hated those aristocracies who just rest on their high status, running away from the truth for money. Julien did not ask the court for any mercy, because he understood that his main crime was that he, a commoner, was indignant over his miserable fate. He charged all the juries with being suborned and insulted them by saying pigs. His fate was decided. The court took Julien's death sentence. In prison to Julien came Madame de Renal. She said that the ill-fated letter was composed by her confessor. Never had Julien been so happy. He understood that Madame de Renal was the only woman he was capable of loving. On the day of execution, he felt cheerful and courageous. Mathilde de la Mole buried her beloved's head with her own hands. And 3 days after the death of Julien, Madame de Renal died. Please subscribe to my channel. We're gonna show you world masterpieces in about 15 minutes with manga. Manga is Japanese-style comics that is easy for everyone to understand. We're sure that you can grasp the context shortly.
See you next time.